You're listening to ThunderQuack Podcast Network.
Hello and welcome to Spider-Man Far From Home Reviewed. I am one of your hosts, Michael Cohen, and joining me for this MCU review is Tim Geraci from Star Wars The Saga Continues. Hey, Tim.
Hey, what's up, Mike? Real excited to be talking about this one. It should be lots of fun.
Yeah, we haven't podcasted together in a while. I think the last time that we recorded, just you and I, has been over a year. So I'm excited to talk Spider-Man. I'm excited to talk the MCU, and I'm just excited to talk to you tonight. This is gonna be fun.
Oh yeah, definitely. Lots of good things going around for this episode.
So if it was not obvious enough from the title, we are reviewing the latest entry in the Marvel Cinematic Universe. This is the 23rd movie, I think. Is that right? How many movies we got in the MCU?
Yeah, you're right. The 23rd.
Yeah, the 23rd entry in the Marvel Cinematic Universe. The final entry in Phase 3, not the beginning of Phase 4. And I think, as we'll discuss tonight, it's pretty obvious why this is the final entry in Phase 3. This is sort of the denouement of Endgame and everything that happened with that. Without further ado, let's get into it. So first, we're gonna do our initial thoughts on the movie. We will not talk about spoilers. So essentially, anything that's been in the marketing, anything that's in a trailer or anything like that, that's all fair game. And then we'll give you guys the verdict. Go see it, don't go see it. I think it's pretty obvious what this one's gonna be. And then we'll get into the spoilers, but we'll warn you before we jump into the full spoilers so that you have time to pause, go watch this movie, and then come back and listen to our spoiler-filled thoughts, of which I'm sure there's going to be a lot. But first and foremost, I think let's talk about let's talk about the thing that's going to distinguish this one. As you know, this is the fifth time that Tom Holland is playing Spider-Man, so I think that at this point we get that. We get him. He's great. He's a great Spider-Man. Yep. Let's talk about the new addition to this entry, and just kind of, again, spoiler-free thoughts, but just our sort of initial thoughts on Jake Gyllenhaal as Mysterio.
Yeah, so one of the things that had me really excited about this movie was the fact that Mysterio was going to be the villain they're taking from the comics to be in this movie. Mm-hmm. And it was interesting when we first got that trailer because they're building him up to be, as a hero in this one, which took me by surprise. But knowing the character, you just know there's going to be something up his sleeve, or not everything's all that it seems to be with him. But just knowing that Mysterio was going to be in it. And once we got that first trailer where he actually had the fishbowl helmet, I mean, I was all in because there was a part of me that was a little worried. Are they going to ditch the fishbowl helmet because it kind of looks ridiculous, even though it's awesome and I love how it looks. But once I saw that in the trailer, like, okay, they're doing it. I mean, I just can't wait to see Mysterio in this movie. And I'm really happy to say he did not disappoint. I mean, ever since we got the first Spider-Man movie back in 2002, we knew the Green Goblin was going to be the villain for that. But ever since then, the two villains I wanted to see in a Spider-Man movie or done in live action were Venom and Mysterio. They're 0 for 2 on Venom right now, but they nailed Mysterio on the first try.
Okay, quick diversion. You don't like Venom? You don't like the Venom movie?
I wasn't a fan of it, no. I will say most of the parts where he had the symbiote and was Venom, I did enjoy that and how they portrayed Venom like that. But leading up to that, I just felt forever to get there. Didn't like the deviations they took, and just the idea that Spider-Man and Peter Parker was not involved with Eddie Brock getting the suit and that connection, because that's why I love the character so much. And even from the get-go, I knew that was always going to be something that wouldn't make me enjoy the movie a lot. But just as a general, even regardless of that, just as a film, I just wasn't a big fan of it. So, but um,
I loved Venom.
Oh, really?
And I think because I went in with such low expectations, yeah, I ended up coming out of that movie really surprised at how much I enjoyed it. But to the point that I really want them to bring it into the MCU and figure out how that character connects in. Because I think that he's a very fun version of that character. But I get it. I get it. The thing is that I don't like Venom as a character. Okay. Like he is not even remotely interesting to me. So I get that. I get that if you care about the character, he's probably not the best version.
Yeah, I still actually want to revisit that movie just to get another take. I only saw it once, and I'm on such a Spider-Man kick right now. Might be a good time to go watch it again.
Yeah.
To see if my opinion changes on it. But with Mysterio, I just felt they did a great job with him, and Jake Gyllenhaal I thought was great in the role too. Mm-hmm. And as we'll get more into spoiler territory, I would just say he was great as everything we saw in the trailers, but once something happens in the movie, I thought it got even better. So
yeah. I mean, we'll save it for spoilers, but I think that I think Spider-Man fans are pleasantly surprised by this movie and the portrayal of Mysterio, meaning that he is given real weight and a kind of reality to the character that he doesn't always get. Sometimes he gets kind of treated as one of the joke characters in the Spider-Man mythos, the fishbowl, the illusions, and all of that sort of thing. But they really managed to capture the essence of that character and do something really cool with it. I mean, Mysterio is actually he's actually pulled some pretty crazy stuff in the comics. So
not necessarily in regards to Spider-Man as well for other Marvel
and
heroes.
that is when he was at his best, right? So one of the things that I'm thinking of is Old Man Logan. Mysterio is actually like the key to that entire thing because is it they all like swap villains or whatever, and Mysterio is the one who messes with Wolverine, right?
Yeah,
and that's how that goes down in that story. And yeah, I mean, like Mysterio, there are a couple of stories where Mysterio definitely kind of goes to the nth degree and really pulls some crazy stuff using his illusion tech. Another great story that involves Mysterio is it's the Daredevil one,
Guardian Devil.
Yeah, that Kevin Smith wrote. That is probably my favorite Mysterio story. And it's one of those ones where it's like, again, he's not dealing with Spider-Man. And that's where like the great thing about that is that Spider-Man has spider sense, and so after he understands what Mysterio is up to, he just uses his spider sense to get out of it. That's how it always is in the comics. That gets tired, and then they switch that villain up and put him with other heroes, and that's where you get to see him be a little bit more ruthless, a little bit more intense, and putting him up against Daredevil and Black Widow actually is this great opportunity for him to really kind of push that and for us to see just what kind of a villain he is. So the turn that they do in this movie to have him portrayed as a hero, that to me is such a great setup, and I don't think that Spider-Man fans are disappointed in the way that he's portrayed. Everybody seems to be pretty excited, but I've heard a couple of people say that they feel he's not as good as Michael Keaton as the Vulture.
I've seen that too. Yeah.
And I would actually argue that I think that they're on level playing field. I don't know that one is better than the other. They're very different types of villains.
Exactly. Yeah.
Vulture is a villain out of necessity, right? Whereas what we see in this movie, it ends up being a little bit more interesting than that. Is definitely more complicated, his Mysterio story. This is difficult because I don't want to get into spoilers. But yeah, I think that there's more complexity to the motivations for Mysterio in this film than there was for Vulture in Homecoming. But at the same time, I feel like Vulture was a bit richer of a performance from Michael Keaton, and I mean, like, that, I think that's just by virtue of the fact that Michael Keaton and Jake Gyllenhaal are very different actors, and Michael Keaton, it's kind of apples to oranges, but for my money, I think that Michael Keaton is a better actor than Jake Gyllenhaal. Not to put Jake Gyllenhaal down, right? I do think that he does a fantastic job in this movie, and I think he's done a great job in other things in the past. But yeah, it's really hard to get into it without getting into the spoilers. Yeah. So let's steer away from Mysterio. Let's talk a little bit more about the tone of the movie. Going into it, I would say I was worried that this was going to be too much of a superhero movie, that they kind of, in the trailers, they really led hard with the whole Iron Man stepping into the shoes, sort of like that aspect of the story seemed like it was going to be a real driving force, and I do think it is a driving force in the film. But I was worried that we were going to lose what made Spider-Man Homecoming so great, which was the teenage angsty John Hughes element, and it's not quite John Hughes in this one. It's a little bit different, but at the same time, like, I think they still really delivered on the whole high school, the romance angles, the dual identity stuff with Spider-Man. I think that they did such a good job in this movie of maintaining that. It's not, like I said, it's not the same as Homecoming, and I think that's where Homecoming is just going to kind of edge Far From Home out for me in terms of, like, comparing Spider-Man to Spider-Man. But I was still pleasantly surprised at how much more of the teenage stuff was in this than the superhero stuff. It was actually, I think it was balanced more so in favor of the high school stuff, because they're, by virtue of the fact that they're on this European school trip, you're kind of stuck with his friends, and that's actually one of the main parts of the story, is how does he get away, like I said, the dual identity. How does he get away with being Spider-Man when he's surrounded by all of these people who, like, will suspect him of being Spider-Man if he disappears and Spider-Man shows up, right? So that to me was as powerful a part of the story, like how Peter grapples with the responsibility of being Spider-Man, but the desire to just be a teenager, as the whole Tony Stark aspect of it.
No, yeah, totally. I mean, going into it as well, I wouldn't say I was necessarily worried about, like, the superhero stuff taking more prominence over the high school teenager stuff. But I will say, one of the things I loved about Homecoming, that to me, that was the first Spider-Man movie that perfectly balanced, the Spider-Man cool action stuff along with Peter Parker dealing with his personal life in high school and all that stuff. I just felt it was so evenly balanced where you got enough of both. One didn't overshadow the other, or you felt like, man, I wish we got more Spider-Man, or I wish we had more Peter Parker. I thought Homecoming did a great job with balancing that act. But in Far From Home, I do agree with you where it was kind of more focused on Peter dealing with being with his friends on that European trip, which was a great setting, by the way. I know there's been seen some stuff out there that wish that going on a European trip wasn't part of the story, or it could have just been stayed in New York, and I could get that, but I just like how it was changed things up and it was different, seeing Peter in a new surroundings with his friends, and just we're in our uh, sixth Spider-Man movie now, with the solo Spider-Man movie, so you got to take him out of his element at some point. So I was totally fine with them going on, globetrotting a little bit here. But with that element of being such a strong focal point of the movie, I think I might say I enjoyed the high school Peter and his friends stuff a little more in this one than I did in Homecoming, even though it was great in Homecoming. Maybe it's because we knew these characters already, and just seeing more of how they interact felt better to me. I felt it was really funny too. There's a lot of laugh out loud moments between characters you wouldn't necessarily expect, but it all worked really, really well. So, and then mixing it up with the Spider-Man action that we got. And you make a great point too about how it was great to see Peter really struggle with, wanting to leave Spider-Man behind just a little bit. I mean, after everything he's been through, after the events of Infinity War and Endgame, you can kind of understand why he maybe would want to just have a little break for a bit, still being a teenager and a kid and all that. So but it made for some great moments and tough decisions that he had to do in the course of the movie, which is just, write up, a typical Spider-Man story, that the reason why we love the character so much, because he does make those tough sacrifices and you feel for him when he has to make those decisions. And I thought the movie did a good job of showing that, and Peter kind of coming to terms with that and growing as a character and just as a hero in general for what he needs to do. So I thought it all played out very nicely with, balancing the high school stuff with his friends, which was great and funny, and then tying it into what he needs to do as Spider-Man. So I thought it did a great job there, even though I did feel it was the high school stuff and him just being Peter Parker was a little more the focal point, but not by much, but just a little bit more that I noticed more so than Homecoming did.
Yeah. I think we can render our verdict now. I think it's pretty obvious how we both feel about it. I would say absolutely 100%. If you haven't seen this movie yet, you need to drop what you're doing and go out and see it. It is, it's the MCU firing on all cylinders. I mean, and there's a lot of great characters in the MCU. They've really nailed a lot of that universe, and they've even elevated some of those characters. I mean, Iron Man is a character that he is more important to Marvel now than he ever has been, but Spider-Man is, Spider-Man is Marvel, right? Like that's like they are synonymous. Spider-Man is number one on the call sheet when it comes to the Marvel Comics universe. And this movie is definitely the movie that shifts Peter out of supporting character in an Avengers story into a main character on the larger stage of the MCU. And that's I'm really interested to see where that's going to go in the future. This is a movie that you can't miss. And I mean, like, all of the MCU films are can't miss movies, but this one especially, I think, really, really pushes it to a fun, exciting, and really heartfelt place. There are a couple scenes in this movie that are very, very genuine and very emotional and have a lot of gravitas, and they just nail the tone. All of the stuff with Happy and Peter is fantastic. Yep. And that is a dynamic that doesn't exist in the comics, that is purely MCU. And it's actually I think it's actually my favorite part of the movie. We'll talk a lot more about that when we get into spoilers, but it's the part that I'm the most excited to see going forward. So yeah, I say go see it. What do you think, Tim?
Yeah, I'd say go see it, but just don't only go see it. Go see it as soon as possible. I would say. I mean, I was super excited about this movie going into it for a lot of reasons. I mentioned Mysterio being one of my favorite villains that I wanted to see in live action. That was one of them. But then after Endgame and then seeing the second trailer that came out for it and how, it's going to show us kind of the aftermath and what Peter's going to go through and the expectations that, he's kind of going to put on himself and then other just people in general going to put on him as far as being the next Iron Man that they were highlighting in the trailers, all that stuff. It just got me even more excited to see it. And when I did, I was just, so happy that it not only lived up to my expectations, but certain moments that we got in the movie kind of exceeded my expectations. So yeah, I loved it. And if you haven't seen it, I highly recommend it. And I say as soon as possible, not only because it's a really great Spider-Man movie, I feel, but it's going to be even better if you go in spoiler free because there's some nice surprises in this one too. So
absolutely,
yeah, see it as soon as you can.
Cool. With that, we are going to go into full-on spoiler mode, so you have been warned. Turn back now, lest ye be spoiled, because we're going to get right into it. Here we go. The turn with Mysterio. Now, you knew it was coming. I knew it was coming. It had to. You don't this is Mysterio's whole thing is illusion. So when they started showing him as a hero and people were like, "What? Mysterio's not a hero." It's like, look, first of all, they're not showing any other villains. Elementals don't count. Yeah. The elementals I really liked as a red herring for a lot of fan speculation where they're like, well, but that's clearly Hydro Man and that's Molten Man. And it's like, no, they're not. They're not. These are those are characters that would never ever. I mean, like, they can make a lot of Spider-Man movies. There are many villains who have not even been used yet that deserve time in the spotlight over Hydro Man and Molten Man. I mean, so let's list out the villains that we've gotten so far. We got Green Goblin, we got Dr. Octopus, we got Green Goblin again with Sandman and Venom. We got the Lizard, we got Electro, and then we got the Vulture. And now we got
Rhino
Mysterio
too, don't forget.
And we got Rhino, that's right.
Kind of.
And now we got Mysterio. We still have
Shocker too.
And Shocker, you're right. Yes, absolutely. And Shocker. We still haven't gotten Scorpion, who like come on, that's like a top 5, right?
Yeah.
We still
Matt Gargan, but we're still waiting for Scorpion.
Yeah. We still haven't gotten Kraven, which
that's who I want.
Come on, right? And we're in spoiler mode now. Post-credit scene, the mid-credit scene, next movie, Kraven and Scorpion at the same time. I'm gonna call it right now. I'm Babe Ruth. I'm pointing to the to the bleachers. That's what we get in the next movie. I will be so surprised if that's not what we end up with. Scorpion they set up. There's no way we don't get Scorpion in the next Spider-Man movie. But yeah, I would really love to see Scorpion and Kraven together. And I'd really love a complex Kraven that is part villain and part hero. And we'll see what happens with that. But on top of that, we haven't gotten the Prowler in the movies other than Spider-Verse. We haven't got... I mean, we have a Kingpin in MCU kind of technically, but also not really. Yeah. I don't think that we'll ever see that, though.
As much as I'd love to see Vincent D'Onofrio's Kingpin match up with Tom Holland Spider-Man.
We've never gotten the Smythes, so we've never gotten Spider Slayers, which would be a big deal. Who else are we missing?
There's Chameleon also.
Chameleon. Oh, so did you know that Chameleon is in this movie?
Oh, well, man, see, that's an Easter egg or reference I didn't catch.
Yeah, so Dimitri, part of
Okay.
Shield, but part of Shield that, as we learn in the post credit scene, I mean, we don't know for sure that Dimitri is a Skrull as well, but when we learn that Nick Fury and Maria Hill are both Skrulls in the movie, it's not a stretch to say that Dimitri, which that's Chameleon's real name is Dimitri, in the comics. It's not a stretch to think that possibly that character is meant to be a reference to the Chameleon. Obviously, he doesn't do anything particularly Chameleon-like, other than the fact that he is pretending to be their driver.
Yeah. Does he talk at all in the movie? I'm trying to think, because I don't. If he did, he doesn't say much.
Yeah, he said he basically just tells Peter, "Oh, go over there," right?
That's right. Yeah. 'Cause I'm just thinking back to the '90s Spider-Man animated series where
Yeah.
Chameleon never spoke unless he was like impersonating someone else,
Yeah.
type of things.
Yeah.
That made me think if he didn't speak, that might be another connection right there.
But what a great way to get around the tech aspect of Chameleon and not retread, because they could obviously do holograms or something like that. But that's obviously what Mysterio is doing. So what a great way to get around that and say, like, well, this version of the Chameleon is a Skrull, so he can shapeshift at will. Like, that's just part of his character. But yeah, and I think actually one of the reasons that why they might have named him Dimitri was to give the hint that this cell of Shield agents are actually Skrulls, so that we kind of get that like sort of Dimitri shapeshifter Skrulls, Nick Fury acting oddly in character, if that makes sense. He never behaves out of character until the very end. With Happy, I think is it gets a little bit like, really? But throughout the rest of the movie, he's almost too in character, and I think that the fun part of that is that it's Talos performing as Nick Fury, right?
Yeah.
So he's laying it on a little bit thick at times, and there were several points in the movie, in fact, credits rolled, and I found myself going, like, I really enjoyed everything about that movie except for Nick Fury, because I really felt that he was way, way, way too hard on Spider-Man. And then you get the post-credit scene, and I'm like, oh, yeah, okay, that makes sense. That makes perfect sense. He was trying to be Nick Fury and not really having the same sort of, like, almost like Fury has this perfect touch of anger and motivational speaker, right?
Yeah.
Like, he's kind of a jerk, but at the same time, he's right. And he can talk to any of the characters in that way. And then the way that he talks to Peter in this movie, to me, it was just like, it was almost a little bit hurtful, especially to a kid. It's like, he just lost his mentor. Like, the guy who was teaching him how to be a superhero died right in front of him, saving the entire universe, every half of all living beings. Like the ultimate sacrifice for the ultimate reason. And actually, I guess at that point it's the whole universe, right? Because Thanos is gonna wipe out everybody. So it's like, yeah, save the entire universe. So it's like cut the kid some slack. He's been through hell and back, and he needs a little bit more of a loving touch than what he's given. And I think that the real Fury would have known where the line was, and Skrull Fury crosses that line a couple of times in the movie, especially later on with the after they defeat the fire elemental, and he sort of dresses him down, and it's a little bit too much, right? Yeah, I don't know. What do you think about that?
Yeah, I mean, I wasn't expecting that end credit scene to be sure, but they're kind of like you. I was thinking, you know what, something a little off about Fury here. The main thing for me is that could he be really that easily duped by Quentin Beck and not suspecting something
Mm-hmm.
from him as far as like being an actual villain or a story not adding up, so to speak. And I was expecting at some point to Fury to tell Peter that like I knew Quentin Beck was lying all along, but I needed to get something from him, or I needed to play along to put him away, or something to where he really knew that he was a bad guy and he would just kind of play along to get him when he really needed to. But that wasn't the case. And once we found out that he was kind of surprised as much Peter was, I was like, huh, maybe Fury is just off his game a little bit because he's maybe been out of action for a little bit. But once we got that post credits or end credits scene, it was like, okay, and I just had like oh shoot, they're doing it. They're doing scrolls really impersonating these characters that you've known for a while in like a full movie without having any hints of it whatsoever. But when you look back on it, it makes total sense. And I'm sure I've only seen it once, but I'm sure when I see it again, I'll probably maybe pick up a few things with Fury and Maria Hill here and there, thinking, okay, maybe that was another little sign to show that it's not the real Nick Fury and Maria Hill.
Mm-hmm.
And there is a small part of me, I wouldn't say, I wouldn't call it as a disappointment, but I was excited about one of the aspects of Homecoming. I was excited about was Nick Fury finally, meeting Spider-Man and going on a mission with him, teaming up, because we've seen a lot of that in the comics and even some animated series, and it's always great. So I was excited that we're finally going to get Nick Fury and Spider-Man in a movie together, and so uh, having Nick Fury be Talos kind of took a little bit away from that, but at the same time too, I can't complain too much because I thought it was a pretty neat surprise, and for what it sets up for Fury not being there as well, and what it means for the future of the Marvel Cinematic Universe going forward. So overall, I'm okay with it, and I know too that eventually that the real Nick Fury and Spider-Man will meet up at some point and
Mm-hmm.
probably go on a mission or have some sequences together. So, but it was a pretty cool surprise. Definitely wasn't did not see that coming. I didn't think there would be too many, uh, connections to Captain Marvel going into a Spider-Man movie. We know Peter name dropped her in the trailer and in the movie, but I thought that would be the extent of it. But the
Mm-hmm.
fact that we got Skrulls in the movie too was just a really cool surprise to get at the very end of the movie.
Yeah. Yeah. I actually tweeted after watching the movie that the mid credit scene and the post credit scene are actually probably two of my favorite. They might be my favorite post credit
Yeah,
scenes.
I mean,
And
I'll have to think about it more, but they're definitely going to be pretty high up there.
I mean, like I'll tell you right now, the mid credit scene with J. Jonah Jameson is absolutely without a doubt my favorite mid credits scene. Like any mid or post credit scene is my favorite one. J.K. Simmons back as JJ and the perfect. It's the one element that's been missing in this incarnation of Spider-Man, right?
Yeah,
Both
just
the Daily Bugle
for a
aspect.
while now, even the Amazing Spider-Man movies didn't have Jameson. So this Spider-Man movies in general have been missing him for far too long.
Yeah, so both the Daily Bugle photographer aspect of it, and it's the high school story, so it makes sense that he's not quite there yet. But we're setting it up. But then also the Spider-Man is a menace, right?
Mm-hmm.
In Homecoming, nobody had any problem with Spider-Man. In Infinity War and Endgame, I mean, obviously in Endgame, there's not a lot of time for that. But in Infinity War, he's still seen as a hero, right? And at the beginning of this movie, he is seen as a hero. And we go through the whole thing, and he's a good guy, and everybody knows that he's a good guy and all that. He saves the day, and everybody loves him for it. But the two things that they did, they set up the Flash Thompson dynamic with Spider-Man so strong and so well in this one. I love how much they played that, because Flash in Homecoming, to me, he was like, there was something missing in that character. I like this incarnation of Flash. I really like this approach. but that aspect was missing. And then in this one, his love affair with Spider-Man is intact, which is super important.
Yeah.
And it's going to be really interesting to see that dynamic in the next movie when we see who has turned on Spider-Man and who remains loyal, right? And and to have Flash be one of the people that's gonna tell everybody to shut up. Spider-Man's a hero. I'm excited for that scene in the next movie, and I just like it's just perfect delivery. Like, it's just the way that the movie ends, and then we go into the credits, the fancy credits, right? And then we come out of that into a continuation, really the rest of the movie, and we get that final moment of J. Jonah Jameson breaking through with an important story, and the Spider-Man is a menace, Mysterio's final plan, and then at the very end, the reveal of Peter Parker as Spider-Man. What's that going to do for that character in the rest of the MCU? And it's going to be really annoying to have to wait for whatever the next movie is that has Spider-Man in it that deals with this. Because we don't know what's next. We know that there are more Marvel movies coming, but we have no idea what the first movie is in Phase 4. We just know when they're happening. I'm actually going to look that up right now. But yeah, I expect news at Comic-Con, I think. Is that next week? In 2 weeks? But yeah, as of right now, we have no idea what's coming down the pipe, and that is a very interesting position to be in at the moment. How do you feel about the post credit, like the J. Jonah Jameson stuff, about the reveal of his identity and all that?
Yeah. So first off, that mid-credit scene was great, and I wish I could say a nice surprise, but I was spoiled on it
Oh
before I
no.
saw it. It was on Twitter, like had nothing to do with anything. Someone just responded. It's actually, Paul, our co-host on Star Wars: The Saga Continues. Wasn't talking anything about Spider-Man, but then someone just responded, "Did you hear the rumor about J.K. Simmons being back as Jameson in Spider-Man?" I was like, oh, that's how I saw it. It was like it's a rumor, but it was after the premiere or the first press screenings. I was like, it's probably likely, but
yeah, that's terrible. What a terrible person.
So when I saw that, I kind of I knew it was probably coming, but at the same time, it didn't lose the effect of how awesome it was seeing not just Jameson back, but that the fact they got J.K. Simmons to come back, because they knew he was perfect for the role, that no one else could probably play Jameson better than he can. Just bring him back. I mean, who cares if it's not in the same universe or timeline as the Sam Raimi movie? So just props to Marvel Studios for recognizing that he is the best Jameson we're going to get. But I was not expecting for, the identity reveal for Spider-Man, and that was a shocker, definitely.
Yeah.
Because I did think, they're just going to frame up Spider-Man to be the villain, and then it would turn some people against him, which again is another classic Spider-Man story trope, which I wouldn't mind seeing in the MCU version as well. But the fact that everyone's gonna know that it's Peter Parker, is like, oh man, how's he gonna get out of this one in the next movie? Just makes me really anxious to see what they're gonna do. Not only just are they even gonna reverse that somehow? I mean, I don't know. I mean, maybe it's something you're just gonna have to live with and come to terms with that. So I'm just really curious to see how they're gonna go about it, and kind of going back to what we're talking about with what villains they're gonna use, and how I'm sure that's gonna be the focal point for the villains, whichever ones they decide to use. It's going to be because they want to take Spider-Man down now that they know who he is. And I think going back to Craven being perfect for that, it makes total sense that he's on wants to have a challenge and face off against a challenging foe, and then now knowing about Spider-Man and who he is, that's like the perfect opportunity for him to come to New York and try to exploit him and to get, to take him down.
Yeah.
So, man, there's so much. I mean, I've seen a lot of mixed reactions about it as far as, or not knowing how to feel about it. But I guess I'm just going to go and say I'm excited about it, to be honest, because it just makes it more interesting to find out, what's going to happen, how Peter's story in the MCU is going to progress. And it can make for some great, growth as a character and just character moments, because you were talking about Flash Thompson and how they established here, what a Spider-Man fanboy he is. And now that he's going to know that Spider-Man is Peter Parker, they could probably potentially have him be, one of his, another close friend he can have along with Ned and, that knows who he is. And it would be like an unlikely friendship that you wouldn't expect. But because of him knowing that Peter is Spider-Man, it can develop them into friends more. So just a lot of different aspects going into it that has me excited. And now that we throw Jameson in the mix, and part of me is thinking, it does complicate things for me anyway, as far as, maybe I'm going the route of Peter Parker going to, work at the Daily Bugle or be a photographer for the Daily Bugle.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that would have been an easy thing to do if they didn't reveal his identity. But if Jameson knows that it's Peter Parker, he's not going to take him on to be his photographer, knowing that he's Spider-Man. So, that aspect might not be in there. But just the fact that Jameson's now going to be a part of the MCU version of Spider-Man that's plenty to be excited for in itself. Because as I said before, it was something that has been missing in live-action Spider-Man films for a while. So it's great that he's back. But yeah, it was definitely a shocker. I mean, just I love the shot that it ended on with Spider-Man's face and his eyes just going so wide and just being so surprised by that news, and then it just cuts to the credits again. Just a great cliffhanger.
Yeah, I think the key is that with Spider-Man, we have 5 other live action movies dealing with Spider-Man, and 1 animated feature film dealing with Spider-Man, on top of Homecoming and now Far From Home. There's not a lot of territory that hasn't already been tread in one way or another. And I think that what they have to do with the MCU is just throw these wrenches into the story to force themselves into new territory with the character. And I mean, like, it's not like in the comic books, Peter Parker hasn't been outed as Spider-Man in the past, and he figures out a way to come back from that. Certainly Civil War was a big storyline where Peter's secret identity is revealed. But this is a little bit different from that. That was obviously his choice. There are repercussions to that, and there will be repercussions to this as well. But I think it puts them in a really interesting position. Like you were saying, I think it sets up Kraven perfectly. I think it also sets up Scorpion perfectly. If you remember it's either the mid-credit scene or the post-credit scene in Homecoming with Mac Gargan and the Vulture, where he basically says to the Vulture, like, "Hey, don't you know who Spider-Man is?" And he's like, "No, I don't know." I think it also sets up a really cool opportunity for a redemption story for Vulture in the future. And so, like, I mean, look, I'm already talking about, we got Scorpion, we got Kraven, now I'm talking about the Vulture. We've got 3 of a Sinister 6, depending on when the Spider-Man Home 3 comes out. There's an opportunity that they could use other movies to set up some of these other Spider-Man villains. The most interesting part of all of this is that we just enjoyed the most recent entry in the MCU. We have no idea what's coming next, as I was saying earlier. The next movie in the MCU doesn't come out until May 1st, 2020. This is the longest stretch we've had since Iron Man to Iron Man 2.
Yeah, that's true, man.
It's almost a full year. Obviously, the stretch between Iron Man and Iron Man 2 was 2 years, but yeah, like this is a long stretch. This is a real long stretch. I It's
Which
been a long
sounds to
time
me the
since
perfect time for me to finally do a full MCU watch
a,
of all the
a
movies.
watch through. Yeah,
Yeah, because I've yet to do that.
yeah. Yeah, so May 1st, 2020. We don't know what that's gonna be. Here's the schedule for them through 2022. May 1st, 2020, November 6th, 2020. Only 2 MCU movies in 2020. Only 2 next year. And no Star Wars movie next year. Well, like what are we gonna do? What are we gonna
Yeah.
do with ourselves next year? February 12th, 2021, May 7th, 2021, November 5th, 2021. I like that we're back to the February, May, November in 2021, but then in 22, February 18th, May 6th, July 29th. Now, I'm going to go out on a limb and say July 29th, 2022. That's Spider-Man 3. That's Spider-Man Homecoming 3. Because that July zone has been Spider-Man's territory.
Yeah.
The Ant-Man movies were August. The Guardians movies were August/July. So that July 29th, maybe that could end up being Guardians. I think Guardians 3 will come sooner than that. It's not coming next year. Maybe not even 21. Possibly sometime in 22. That seems like a good one for May 6th. But we also have no idea what the Avengers are gonna be in this, or like what those types of, like the groups coming together, or if there even will be one. The other thing is that there are some teasers. There's an Easter egg towards the end of this movie where we see Avengers Tower, Stark Tower, under construction, and some signs. One of which that says, so there's a series of them. This 1, 2, 3, and then question mark, and then shoot, what does it say? It says something about like something is coming, something big is coming, or something like that.
I didn't even notice that.
What's coming next, or something, and the prominent fan speculation is that that's obviously Fantastic Four. 1, 2, 3, 4. Somebody bought Stark Tower. The assumption is that it's fantastic. It's Reed Richards. It's the Fantastic Four, and that we're gonna see Fantastic Four in Phase 4. I will go ahead and say that's probably not coming next year. If it is, it'll be that November 6th one, because we don't even know that it's happening. They need to film it, obviously, and then they need to do
hired writers and directors,
post-production.
Yeah.
I mean, like a pre-production could be underway. Then we just don't know about it yet. They just haven't announced it yet.
True.
But May 1st seems like a stretch for that.
Yeah,
That would be crazy for them to announce it.
it'd be a nice surprise though.
Yeah, mid-July at Comic-Con, and then come back with, like, oh, the next movie is going to be Fantastic Four. One of the great things is that Fantastic Four could very well have Spider-Man in it, because that's a character that's very closely tied to that team. As a matter of fact, he joins the Fantastic Four at one point when it's the Future Foundation. So, yeah, I mean, like we could very well see a Fantastic Four storyline that includes Spider-Man. And that would be a great place for them to introduce a Spider-Man villain, as well as just continue his story and deal with a little bit of the fallout of Far From Home. But yeah, and I don't even think we're gonna see the X-Men.
Not for a while.
If we do, it's 22. It's not.
I think it's going to be beyond that.
But I do think that the X-Men are Phase 5.
Yeah.
Yeah. We might start to see some hints at mutants, and we may even get to meet a couple of mutants in the next 3 years.
Mm-hmm.
But I don't think that we're going to see an actual X-Men movie happening. yeah, it'll be interesting to see what goes on with that. But we've kind of talked the end of the movie and all the post credit stuff. Let's rewind a little bit and go back into the actual meat of this movie and talk about Mysterio and the stuff that we wanted to talk about with him, with his turn. Great reveal. Crystal did not understand. She doesn't really have the context for Spider-Man. She doesn't know that Mysterio is a bad guy.
Okay.
So she was legitimately surprised.
That's cool.
The second that Peter started in on the first off, Peter's like comes to the realization. He's like, I'm gonna give you Edith. And I was like, I sunk in my seat and went, no, Peter, no. And it was one of those things where I'm like, I know that this has to happen in order for the third act to happen, but I don't want it to. And that is good filmmaking when it's like, this is where it's going. Mysterio is a bad guy. We know that. At that point, it's like, oh, yeah, he's definitely going to turn into a bad guy. And, yeah, it's gonna happen, but you're still like, no. So I really enjoyed that moment, but I think that I might have tipped Crystal off a little bit. But then she was like, oh yeah, no, he's the bad guy, isn't he? And I'm like, yeah, he's the bad guy.
That's the great thing about it too, where us as Spider-Man fans and comic fans, we knew it's coming to the movie at some point. It's just, how are they going to do it? Like, what's going to be his motivation? How, like, what's his purpose for doing all this? And that was a surprise to me. I was not expecting him to be a former employee of Tony Stark and kind of rounding up a bunch of other disgruntled employees that work for Stark Industries. So that was really surprising. I thought it worked so well. And another thing that was really cool is adding to, the history of the MCU is Quentin Beck being the one who pretty much developed Barf that we saw in Civil War. And the fact that it even showed him there in that sequence in Civil War where Tony's giving that presentation is like behind the scenes, and just like can't believe what he's just heard, and Tony calling it Barf and just like ruining his work and then being fired for being unstable and all that stuff. So just, going a different direction with Quentin Beck than in the comics of him being, a special effects guy and working in the movie industry. So, but it works so well in the MCU and his connection to Tony Stark and just, wanting to do this. And now that Tony Stark's gone, and just the only way he feels to people, just the general people of the world, to see him and notice him, and this is to be a hero, as he's putting on a cape. That's the only way people will notice. And he's going about it in a way, of course, that, fits into the Mysterio MO as far as using trickery, illusions, and all that stuff. And I felt they even threw a little bit of his, special effects background in the comics a little bit at that moment where he's working, on like a studio soundstage in the motion capture suit, getting the effects right and the visuals he wants everyone to see for his final confrontation with an elemental that we see at the end. It's just all great stuff that fit into the Mysterio that I grew up being a fan of, and what makes him such an appealing villain. And also too, as far as Jake Gyllenhaal's performance, I mentioned before how once it was revealed that he was the bad guy, and just how he kind of took it up a notch in his performance, hamming it up even in that instance where he's talking with the employees in that makeshift bar there, and just really playing into that aspect of Mysterio, who does ham it up a lot sometimes and plays into that, going into that background of creating illusions and whatnot, and just put it on that movie side of him, I guess, and that movie background that the character has. In Jake Gyllenhaal's performance, I felt brought that as well. So I just loved everything about it. I felt the character just got better once he turned into the actual bad guy, and his interactions with Peter got even better too. So, and man, that illusion sequence that we got, when I found out Mysterio was going to be in the movie, I wanted to see something like that. Him use his tricks and illusion and his powers that, I've come accustomed to in the Mysterio stories. And the sequence we got in the film did not disappoint. I loved how it looked visually and just everything Spider-Man had to go through and figure out, like what's real and what's not. And then we get a curveball where we think he's out of it. And Nick Fury is asking, he shoots Quentin Beck, and then he finds out, telling Spider-Man or asking him, who did you ask you to tell about it? You got to tell me. And then it's still an illusion by Mysterio. Just some great visuals that stick with you after you see it. Him falling into that cemetery, and then the zombie Iron Man comes out, being, in like a snow globe effect, but then it turns into Mysterio's helmet. Just all that stuff was so well done, and it was exactly what I was hoping to see in a Spider-Man movie that featured Mysterio as the villain. I could not be happier with how they did the character, and then just visually utilizing all his abilities that we know he can do. They just did a great job with him.
And they went all the way in both aspects of the character. They, as you said, the sequence is phenomenal. It's probably one of the best visual effects sequences in the history of the MCU. I mean, like, it's some Doctor Strange type stuff.
Yeah.
And it's just so well done. It's such a great dream sequence type situation, but playing with illusion versus reality. So they nailed that, which is, to me, of all of Spider-Man's villains, this is the hardest one to pull off.
Yeah.
And this is why it's the hardest one to pull off. And the fact that they did that sequence with such skill is a testament to these films. And in particular the Spider-Man ones. I mean, like they went the completely other direction with Vulture in the last one, where they made him totally realistic, and they really kind of shed a lot of the more fantastical elements of that character with the age sucking stuff and whatnot. And they nailed that. I mean, like, they did a great job with that incarnation of the Vulture. I love that character. But then here they subvert your expectation by making him out to be a hero at the beginning. But then they turn that on its head, which is a story that they've done with Mysterio in the past in the comics. But they do it so well. And this sequence is just so unbelievably well executed, because it's not just a cool trippy sequence, like, it's not just the Doctor Strange of it all sort of neat, they did some cool special effects. It's meaningful.
Yeah.
Right? The emotional context of it, the Iron Man stuff especially, I mean, yeah, they go there, and the brutality of it is the other element of me saying that they go there with it. We talked about Mysterio in those other stories with Old Man Logan and with Daredevil, and Mysterio is merciless in those stories, and causes those characters to essentially break their code in order to break them as people, right? To defeat them, because we all know you can't defeat superheroes by punching them. You have to break them down. And Mysterio is so good at that. And they do that in this story. And it just shows it's kind of the opposite of what they did in particular with the ASM films, and especially in the X-Men films, where they take an element of a character and they go, okay, well, we've got this element, so we're gonna call this Apocalypse, right? And then it's like, well, that character isn't a great Apocalypse. It shows like a very surface understanding of the character, but not a deep understanding of the character, right? Yeah. And with the Lizard and Electro in the Amazing Spider-Man films, again, surface understanding of those characters. They are as well realized as they were in some of the lesser episodes of the Spider-Man 90s cartoon, like, but that does it better than, like, the Lizard from the Spider-Man cartoon in the 90s. Like, it's about his first appearance is about on par with Amazing Spider-Man, until the third act, when for some reason he's just it's the same. there was a trend there for a minute where every movie ended with a device on the top of a tall building,
Yeah.
and swirling blue clouds. But this deconstruction and execution of Mysterio is so pitch perfect. It's really quite amazing how well they pulled it off.
Yep.
And I'm astounded at how great it is in every element. I mean, they get you in the first half of the movie. You want him to be a hero, and they make him out to be sort of almost everything that Tony wasn't to Peter, right? Like Tony was
'cause
always
he told Peter what he wanted to hear most of the time.
exactly, yeah. Like Tony was always kind of at arm's length, and that was a Tony Stark thing. He kept everybody at arm's length, right? Everybody at arm's length, even Happy, even Pepper. Everybody was just slightly outside his sphere. Perhaps not in Endgame. Maybe he and Pepper had worked through that post Infinity War and everything that happens in that, which is kind of one of the things that makes the end of his story so tragic. Is he finally figured it out? He got everything he ever wanted, and yet his worst nightmare came true. But he stops it. He saves the world. But Tony kept Peter at arm's length for a reason, and that's part of Tony's story in Infinity War and Endgame, is like losing Peter it's his worst nightmare. That's the thing, right? And so for Peter, here comes somebody with, unknown to him, an intimate knowledge of Tony Stark, having worked with him. And knowing that character flaw and knowing those elements and being vindictive about it, knows the dynamic with Peter and Tony by talking to him, right? And then twists that knife and uses it, right? And he builds the perfect illusion of everything that Peter wanted Tony to be, but he wasn't, right? The understanding, the nurturing, the more calm, steady approach, which Tony never was for him. Tony was always like frenetic and a bit biting and standoffish with Peter, even though he saw all this potential in him, right? Because he just didn't know how else to be. He's a deeply flawed character, as we discuss in this film, right? So Mysterio uses that against him, and then turns, and it's just, I mean, in the sequence, the stuff that he says, it's all so good at taking Peter's insecurities and playing on them, and then the juxtaposition of that when Happy comes to pick him up. And it's great because at the beginning of the movie, we set up Happy as an adversary to Peter.
Yeah, that's true.
With all of the stuff involving Aunt May, as well as their relationship from the previous film and from the little bit from Civil War, sort of, that we get implied from Homecoming, right?
Mm-hmm.
We're meant to think that they're at odds with each other, and then we get the moment in the tulip field, which is just a beautiful scene, and then they go onto the plane and onto the jet, and Happy has that moment with him. That is my favorite part of the movie. This is my favorite part of the movie, is when Happy he's breaking down and he's like, I can't do this. I can't save anybody. I can't, like, I'm never going to be Iron Man. And Happy says, nobody expects you to be Iron Man. No one can live up to the legacy that Tony left. Not even Tony could live up to that. And it's everything that Peter wanted Beck to be in that moment. Happy is that. He's a person who, he understands Tony, he understands Peter, he gets what the kid is going through, and he says the exact right thing. And then Peter's like, "Oh, I need a suit." And that it goes from that great heart of the movie, that great emotional scene, into like, "Oh, I'm never going to be Iron Man. I'll never live up to that." And then he's I need a suit. "Oh, we can do that." And he hits the buttons and whatever, and the thing opens up, and Peter goes back there. He opens up the stuff and he starts going, and we cut back to Happy, and Happy has that look on his face where he's like, I see, where you finally get that Happy now sees what Tony saw. And then Peter starts opening everything up, and he pulls out the web shooter, and he does the whole thing, and he sticks his hand into the hologram, and he pulls it out, and he turns around and he looks at Happy, and he's like, "What?" And Happy's just like, "Nothing." It's that moment of, he is the next Iron Man. He is the heir to Tony Stark's legacy in that moment. And the way that he just he got the crap beaten out of him. Everything is at stake. The world seems like it's against him in that moment. But he picks himself back up. He goes to the workstation, and he's the mechanic. That's that Iron Man 3 moment for Tony of like that Harley helps him see of, it's not the suit, it's you're Iron Man, right? And this is that moment for Peter of, you're Spider-Man, and you can't be Iron Man. You're not going to be Iron Man, but you are Spider-Man, and that's just as good, if not better. Right. And Happy sees that, and then he's got the great moment of, you take care of the suit, I'll handle the music. And then he hits the thing and Back in Black starts playing. And then to take the perfect moment and undercut it in the absolute perfect Spider-Man way of this character that we've come to know and love. Oh man, I love Led Zeppelin.
Yeah, that was
and
great.
It's just, it's so good, because you feel Tony Stark in that scene, even though he's not there.
Totally. Yeah.
Right? And that's what makes that my favorite moment in this entire movie, is just like, I went into it really hoping that when Peter put on the glasses, that it was going to be Tony Stark in his ear, that it was going to be an AI construct built off of Tony's personality, that Robert Downey Jr. isn't gone, Tony's not gone, he's just different. He's just transformed into something else, and that he's still going to be a part of Spider-Man's story. I was disappointed that didn't happen, and I still am, but in the same breath, I'll say, like, just because Robert Downey Jr. is not present in the film and Tony Stark isn't physically present, or even the AI is not present, he's in this movie from start to finish. And that's what makes it such a perfect cap to Phase 3 and the Infinity Saga, is Peter goes through some of the same trials and tribulations that Tony did post Avengers, but he deals with it a little bit better, and he comes out the other side even stronger than I think Iron Man did. Because obviously Iron Man comes out of that and then goes on to Age of Ultron, and he screws up again because he overcompensates in a certain way. But Peter's not going to do that. Peter's on a different path, on a better path. And the reason why is because Tony put him on that path. Tony learned his own mistakes, and he says it. He essentially teaches the lesson from Iron Man 3 in Homecoming, when Peter's like, "You can't take the suit. I'm nothing without the suit." And he's like, "Well, then you shouldn't have it. Give it back. Give me back the suit. Like, if you're nothing without the suit, you don't deserve it." And that's the lesson of Iron Man 3. And he teaches that to Peter in Homecoming, which then leads to his actions in Infinity War and Endgame. and now we see the growth from that lesson in Far From Home. And like, how are they even doing this in movies? Like, telling these stories with this much depth and this much interwoven fabric. It's incredible. It's great that we're getting good Marvel movies. Like, that's cool, right? Just that Mysterio is great and the characters are all fun, and with like encapsulated within Far From Home, we get a really cool movie that's really, really fun. But then outside of that, all of the connections to the MCU, the deeper levels between these stories, the Star Wars level interconnectivity and ability to dissect, digest, and build on the movies after we've seen them. Kevin Feige is a genius. I give him a Nobel Prize. Give him like saint the guy, like
all the accolades you can give.
Yeah, knight him, a Medal of Honor. I don't know why you get the Medal of Honor. I think it has to do something with military service, but whatever, just give it to him. Captain America, it counts. Just give him every award there is to give, because he has done something that no other producer, no other creative, no other storyteller in Hollywood has managed to do. The only other person who comes close is George Lucas, and let's be honest, the prequels are a near miss, right? We love them, you and I love them, but they didn't connect with a wider audience, right? And that's a failure. That's a failure of those stories, and it's a failure that I think George Lucas accepts and understands, and he told the stories he wanted to tell, and that's fine. But how much better would it be if he had managed to tell those stories in a way that connected with a wider audience and not just hardcore Star Wars fans?
Yeah.
These Marvel movies, like, honestly, in the world today, it might be the only good thing we got going, right? Like the only pure thing out there. And like they're just doing such a good job with them. And this movie is just yet another jewel in the crown that is the Marvel Cinematic Universe. Every time they go out to bat, you go like, oh, maybe this will be the one where they finally lose it. And yet, no. I mean, they it feels like they keep getting better, right?
I mean, yeah, they've hit home runs. Some of them are, doubles, singles, but they've never like made an out or struck out.
Yeah, they always get on base. They always get on base.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
It's the perfect analogy, because even if Ant-Man and the Wasp is just a single, right? It's fine, because Infinity War already loaded the bases.
Yeah.
So you scored a point, because the end of that movie, you get the Infinity War tie-in, and you're like, okay, yeah, nope, good by me.
Yeah.
I mean, like, I say that saying Ant-Man and the Wasp is in my top 10 MCU, right? So, actually, I mean, like, I'd have to look at it. I think it's just edged out of my top 5.
That's the other thing. The rankings and top fives keep changing. With every new movie that comes out, you always got to reevaluate.
I did it today. I ranked my top 5, or like I ranked Far From Home, which usually I need to see the movie more than once before I can rank it, but with this one I was pretty confident with where I put it. So my top 5 right now. Look for the connection. Avengers Endgame, Spider-Man Homecoming, Iron Man 3, Far From Home, Doctor Strange. That's my top 5. And I actually just readjusted it and moved Black Panther down under Doctor Strange. It would have been in my top 5, but today I rearranged that and went like, no, Black Panther's great. It is one of the best Marvel movies, I think. But for me, like, I really love that character of Doctor Strange. So then it's Black Panther, Ant-Man and the Wasp, Ant-Man, and then Infinity War, Thor Ragnarok. So that kind of rounds out. I think I went more than 10. 1, 2, 3,
Man, I was like,
6, 7, 8,
I could
9,
probably
10. No, that's
do
my top 10.
I could probably do a top 5, but the order of them might not not
Oh, dude,
fluctuate so
I
much.
have them all ranked. You want me to finish the ranking?
Oh, go for it.
So
I
after Thor
definitely can.
Ragnarok is Age of Ultron, and then Guardians Volume 1 Guardians Volume 2 followed by Volume 1. Which is probably going to be controversial to some people. Civil War.
I actually agree. I enjoy Volume 2 a little bit more than Volume 1.
Cool. Civil War, Iron Man 2, Avengers, Captain Marvel, Winter Soldier. I know I'm going to get a lot of flack for putting it down that low. The first Avenger, first Captain America, Thor, The Incredible Hulk, and then Thor: The Dark World at the bottom. Which I think is that's probably pretty common. I think people kind of flip the Incredible Hulk, Thor: Dark World. Dark World is a very compromised film. Incredible Hulk is at least what they wanted to put on screen. Dark World is not. To me, those two movies are the only times they ever whiffed the ball. And if we continue the baseball analogy, because even Thor is a single for sure. Thor is a great movie. It's just not. It's not nearly as good as the rest of these. But this is the thing with the Marvel movies. They're all fun. They're all good movies. They're all worth watching. Incredible Hulk is still worth watching. Mm-hmm. It's just not really worth rewatching more than twice. You got to go through it when you do your rewatch, right? But and same with Dark World. If you're doing a rewatch, you got to watch it. Otherwise, you can probably skip it. But yeah, that's my ranking. I keep this list and I update it every time a new one comes out. So, and Captain Marvel, I kind of reserve the right to move that up in the future or down possibly. We'll see how it ages with time. It is a great movie, but I don't know. I'm not quite prepared to put it as high up as like the Iron Mans or Guardians of the Galaxies. Yeah. That's my feeling.
Oh yeah, I can't even fathom doing a ranking of all of them.
Well,
I probably should at one point, but
I did this while I was doing my rewatch, right? Which was the whole point. So I was doing it along with Kind of Funny. They were doing the MCU in review.
Okay.
And going through and every week they would review another MCU film in release order. So you watch the movie and then listen to the review podcast. And then they were ranking them. So as they went through and ranked them, I did my list as well. And I think that's the only way that you can do it. You basically just start with, you go, okay, Iron Man is at number 1 because there's nothing else yet. And then you go Iron Man 2. Okay, which one's better, Iron Man or Iron Man 2? Mm-hmm. Okay, what comes next? Is it Cap or Thor?
Thor.
It's Thor, yeah. So then you put
actually
Thor.
Hulk in between.
I guess Hulk in between, right? So Hulk is at the bottom. Thor, where's that? Is it better than Iron Man 2? No, it's not better than Iron Man 2. So you just do it that way, and you just kind of have to go through and go, okay, what's my current 5, and then watch the 6th movie and go, does this knock anybody out, right? Can we move this up? And then eventually you end up with a list that's your definitive ranking.
Yeah, so that is a great way to do it. So I mentioned maybe now a good time to do a Marvel Cinematic Universe rewatch. I probably should do that now as I watch it.
It's time.
That's a good idea.
Yeah, you got to do it. Cool. Is there anything else about the movie that you wanted to talk about? We haven't even talked about the MJ aspect of it. I think that they executed all that stuff really well.
Yeah, that was done. They have good chemistry together. Yeah. So Tom Holland is in there.
She's great. And I think like that it's a very different version of Mary Jane. Obviously it's not Mary Jane, it's Michelle, but MJ, I love it. I love the direction that they go with it. I love the scene at the end with the web slinging and her reaction to it is really great.
There was like a shot that was, before he was swinging with her, but he was just swinging by himself. That was pretty much just straight out of the PS4 game where he's doing the selfie pose.
Right. I thought the same thing. Yeah.
Yeah, that's a pretty cool nod there.
It made me want to go back in and play that game.
Yeah.
The web swinging in this one. The final fight between Spider-Man and Mysterio, and when he unlocks his Peter Tingle, he really like embraces the spider sense, which is the only way to defeat Mysterio, right? And And that sequence in the bridge, in the glass bridge, right, where he faces down Mysterio and he does all of the bullet dodging and everything, and it's just
So
the
that,
choreography is all just so great.
yeah, I was gonna say that's got to be one of the best Spider-Man action sequences
Yeah.
there is. I mean, it's like you said, the choreography was awesome. Seeing him fully utilize the spider sense was just great to see.
That sequence is when he fully becomes Spider-Man.
Yeah,
He's not young Spider-Man. He's not Spider-Man as a teenager learning the ropes. That's the moment when he transforms from Tony Stark's protege Spider-Man into he is Spider-Man.
mm-hmm.
Like, that's the legit 100% utilizing all of his abilities properly Spider-Man. He built the suit himself. He came up with the plan, the science plan to defeat the villain, which is like that is the element to me that I felt was missing from the Sam Raimi Spider-Man films, is that there was never. I mean, Spider-Man 2 a little bit less. There's kind of a little bit of that science-y stuff in there, and Amazing Spider-Man did nail that stuff. They did do a really good job of Peter solving the problem with science. But this one, it's the best execution of that, I think, because it's like, how am I going to defeat all these drones? He goes in prepared with a plan, and that's how he wins. And that's how Spider-Man wins. Spider-Man's the underdog. The villains always have it up on him. They've always got an army or henchmen or robots or better powers or a symbiote suit that evades his spider senses. And Peter it's never Spider-Man that wins. It's always Peter that wins, right? It's always the scientist Peter Parker that wins. And they nailed that with this one. Peter Parker, it's Tony Stark, not Iron Man, right? Peter Parker is Spider-Man, not Spider-Man is Peter Parker. The thing that the Marvel stories have over DC is, in DC it's flipped. Superman pretends to be Clark Kent. Batman pretends to be Bruce Wayne, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, I just think that they nailed that stuff. They did such a great job.
Agreed.
Of all that stuff. Yeah, Spider-Man: Far From Home. Home run. I can't wait for more stories with this character in particular. But like, I'll take any of it. Give me another Ant-Man. Give me another Guardians. Give me Falcon and Bucky. That I think that is the thing that'll tide us over, is that coming in November we've got Disney Plus. We don't know which Marvel series are going to be premiering with Disney Plus, if any. We know it'll premiere with The Mandalorian, but we know that there's the Loki series in development, or in production even. The Bucky and Bucky and Falcon, which will now be Bucky and the new Captain America, I assume.
Yeah.
And then the Scarlet Witch and Vision series. We know that those are all being produced / developed. So it's a matter of when are they going to come out, and I think that that'll be the thing that gets us through in the lulls now. And they'll be smart about when they release that for sure.
Yeah, which will probably be pretty close to on par with the production quality of the feature films too. Not quite, but they're going to do as much as they can with the TV budget.
I think what we'll end up with is smaller stories, right? More personal stories, but that doesn't mean that. Look, if you think that Falcon's not going to have the shield and the stars and stripes in this series with Bucky, like, that's why they're making that show, and that's why Endgame ends the way that it does with his character, right? Like, they're setting that series up, and that's going to be fantastic. I'm excited about that.
Yeah, that's the one I'm probably excited for the most.
Yeah. So we'll see when all that stuff's going to come. Again, Comic-Con is in a week and a half at this point. We're going to learn a lot. But closing thoughts on Spider-Man Far From Home? I've talked enough.
Yeah, I loved it. Like I said, I was super excited going into it, and they nailed all the things I was excited about with Mysterio, and the kind of showing how the world is after Endgame and the effects that Infinity War had, and Spider-Man living up to, the potential that Iron Man saw in him now that he's gone. And another thing I wanted to, I guess, close out real quick, and this goes back to what you were talking about with the scene with Happy and Peter, is how I'm getting tired of some complaints about the MCU version of Spider-Man that, oh, this isn't Spider-Man, he's just Iron Man Jr. And I've seen that complaint still with this movie, but that sequence with Happy and Spider-Man, that's the whole point of realizing that's not the case. I mean, he's Spider-Man. When he's saying, oh, how can I be the next Iron Man? You don't be the next Iron Man. You be Spider-Man. That's how you become the next. Like, the whole thing about being the next Iron Man isn't literal. It's about being the next great hero is what they're talking about by saying that.
Yeah.
And that's what Spider-Man is going to become. And I think it makes total sense that they're doing it this way in the MCU, because as you were mentioning earlier, that Spider-Man is Marvel. Like, he's the face of Marvel Comics. I mean, he's their biggest character, the biggest hero. I mean, if in the perfect world where they had the rights from the get-go, he probably would have kicked off the MCU, but that wasn't the case. And the way they brought him in, we knew it had to be different because all these characters like Iron Man have been established already. And the fact that they bring Peter in at this young age and have him be someone who, looked up to Tony Stark, and Tony Stark kind of sensed a kindred spirit in him and knew his potential, all works so well in him to becoming that, main hero character that is going to be kind of the face of the MCU now. They're just all building that toward Peter's character and the arc that it goes on, that he is going to become that main superhero that we know how he is in the Marvel Comics. And I think they did a great job with that, as far as, Iron Man being the mentor and passing that, what he needs to be that hero along down to him, and Peter learning the lessons throughout the course of several movies. And it kind of culminates into this one, to finally taking that full step in becoming, the Spider-Man that we know he's going to be, that great hero that we all know and love and has this great history. So I'm tired of hearing that complaint. And even after this movie, after I thought they kind of did a great job of showing it's not the point of him, being Iron Man. It's becoming his own hero, but becoming that great hero that Iron Man is. So I thought they did a good job with that. So I loved it. I can't wait to see it again. My only complaint about it, and it's not really anything that's in the movie, it's what's not in the movie. Because if you remember that trailer, we got that cool sequence of Spider-Man taking down those gangsters, and it looked like a restaurant. It just looked like a really cool, fun action sequence that, was going to kick off the movie, because in the trailer he goes, I'm heading off to vacation, when he's talking to the police officers. And I couldn't wait to see that, because there was some cool action just shown in that trailer. And then they're already on the plane ride. It's like, I don't think we're getting that sequence here. So I'm sure we'll get it in the Blu-ray for a deleted.
It'll be on the Blu-ray.
Yeah,
don't worry. We'll see it.
Yeah. So just a testament to how great the movie is, where the only issue I have is something that wasn't even in there that affected the story overall.
Look, my problem with this movie is there's not more of this movie for me to enjoy.
Pretty much, yeah.
Yeah, agreed. Yeah, my problem with any of these Marvel or even the new Star Wars movies is that they end. Why they gotta end? Anyways. Well, that's it. That wraps it up for this episode of ThunderQuack Reviewed. Thank you for listening. Of course, you can check out ThunderQuack.com for all the other great podcasts in the ThunderQuack Podcast Network. And if you like what you hear, you can support us in two ways. First, by going to store.thunderquack.com to pick up some merch, or by heading to patreon.com/thunderquack and pledging your monthly support. $1 gets you early access to the ThunderQuack podcast and the exclusive Facebook group. If you want to hear more from me specifically, you can hear me on the ThunderQuack podcast at thunderquack.com, as well as on Rebel Cells at rebelcells.com. That's cell with one L. Like the animation cell. Get it? Because it's about animation, Star Wars animation. And we'll be back with new episodes when Star Wars Resistance comes back. But we might have a couple of treats between now and then, depending on the news cycle and whatnot. So you can hear me on those, and you'll be able to hear me on the final season of Quiver the Green Arrow podcast, along with the final season of Arrow this fall in October. So check that out if you are so inclined. And if you want, you can follow me on Twitter and Facebook. Sorry, not Twitter and Facebook. On Twitter and Instagram at ArkWolf, ARKWULF. Tim, you want to plug anything?
Yeah. So as Mike said in the intro, you can hear me on Star Wars: The Saga Continues podcast. We just dropped our solo commentary last week, and we recorded our episode fully devoted to the Mandalorian. So I'll look for that in the next couple of days. And you can follow me on Twitter at TimG311, where lately I've just been tweeting about Spider-Man Far From Home. So if I was excited enough just tweeting about it, it was great to actually talk about it on this episode. So it was a lot of fun. I just had been having Spider-Man on the brain I would say even before the movie came out, because hearing a lot of the positive reaction towards it and everyone saying stay spoiler free and the end credit scenes are so great, it just got me even more pumped for it. And the fact that it delivered and all that, it's just great. So it's been a fun couple of weeks, just being a Spider-Man nerd.
Yeah, it's been a good couple of years to be a Spider-Man fan. Awesome. Well, thank you everybody for listening, and I will be back soon-ish. What's the next thing gonna be? Oh, Stranger Things 3. We'll have an episode to review Stranger Things 3 soon-ish. Not in the next week or two, but probably a little bit after that. Give people some time to watch through it. I am gonna leave right now and go watch an episode before I go to bed. Thanks for listening.
Me too.
Good, awesome. Thank you, Tim, for joining me on this one. It was a great episode, great conversation. And we will see you guys on the next ThunderQuack Reviewed.
See you next time, everybody.